Hey, if there's anyone still out there, I just finished recording the audio for a new episode breaking down Jesse Armstrong's Mountainhead. I don't know when it will be out because editing is just such a laborious process, and I have to gather all my citations, screenshots, etc. I know my videos suck, but they still take a long time for me to put together. I thought at some point I would develop a workflow that would make the process faster, but so far, no luck. I kind of understand why bigger YouTubers outsource the process. It's a huge pain in the ass, and for someone like me who has no real expertise in video editing, my work rate is probably slower than average. The quality I know is definitely terrible. And I know some of you might be thinking, well, actually, you could be using this time to edit that episode. And yeah, that's true. However, I've spent the majority of my free time this week working on it, and I just wanted to take a break and just rant a little bit. As I noted before, I have a Blue Sky and I don't really post there that often. I'm more of a reply guy when I use it. I'm just not super great at self promotion, nor do I have any brief, witty observations that I usually feel like throwing out into the ether. However, it is one of those things I do use to unwind, and part of that means that I normally just comment on posts from people I follow, which in my case means accounts of people I don't know personally and who have extremely large followings. That is to say, celebrities and random publications. I don't really know why I do it. I guess for me, it just feels sort of good to exercise my thoughts in the direction of someone so that it doesn't feel like I'm screaming into the void. Even though when I do reply, there's just a statistically low probability that person will ever see what I said, let alone acknowledge it. So it was kind of surprising to me to see that Francesca Fiorentini had liked a reply that I put up on one of her videos where she argues, rather comedically, that conservatives should actually embrace Jeffrey Epstein based upon their worldview and previous actions. Now, whether or not this was actually her or her social media manager, or if the like itself was the result of some weird accident, I can't say. Any outcome, frankly, is equally plausible to me. I'm not really here to gush about an entertainer whose work I enjoy acknowledging me. I'm just using this as a jumping off point to discuss, from my perspective, a topic that is being circulated in the most prominent left media spaces in a way that I feel sort of reveals a cultural blind spot. And I just want to disclaim ahead of time that this is purely anecdotal, and I wouldn't take everything I say as a statement of fact. Again, this is more informed by my own upbringing in a very conservative part of the country. But to expand on what I had posted to Francesca's Blue Sky, I have noticed that there's this sort of hopeful, if not gleeful, sentiment that is being voiced on programs like The Majority Report, Surf Times, and even Francesca's show, The Bituation Room, that the Epstein scandal will be the one thing that finally breaks Trump's spell over everyone under the Republican umbrella. And maybe it's a bit too late to say this given what we know about some of the polling that has been released since, but I would not want to get my hopes up here. Francesca astutely points out in her video that everything Epstein has done actually does not violate any of the moral codes of the average Republican. It's true, they don't believe in women nor children having any semblance of autonomy, nor do they believe in things like the age of consent. As someone from a pretty conservative part of the country, I feel extremely confident in saying that there is actually very little that Epstein has done that offends the average red state Republican. The only plausible avenue of attack, at least from my experience, would be kind of a narrow appeal to the fact that Epstein defiled these young girls against the wishes of their fathers. But even then, most conservatives would blame the parents for failing to keep their child pure. I know this sounds crazy to a lot of people who may hear this, especially if you're in more liberal areas of the country or the world. But as I've said before, I went to high school in a very white, very conservative part of the country that openly refused to acknowledge Martin Luther King Jr. Day because so many people in that town believed that civil rights and the civil rights movement was a foreign communist psyop. Even amongst my classmates at the time, it was not uncommon to have a handful of girls who were quote unquote promised to much older men. In particular, whenever prom rolled around, there was always like 4 or 5 girls who were arguably upper middle class, whose dates were in their late 20s, if not much older, who, would just attend prom like it was normal, and then after high school would end up getting married to these men. I'm not saying that people at the Majority Report or Francesca Fiorentini shouldn't keep hammering Republicans by continuously reiterating Trump's ties to Epstein, but I do want them and a lot of the major left and left-leaning voices in online media to temper their expectations about the effectiveness of such attacks, because, I don't want to be like, oh, these are coastal elites and they're kind of out of touch. But to some degree, there is a blind spot when it comes to red state America in left and left-leaning media spaces, simply because they are not usually located in red areas, so they're not as well versed in the culture of red state America. And really, the only left-leaning online media channel I can think of that I know is located in the middle of a red state is the Vanguard, and even they don't really discuss a lot of topics from the angle of living in a red state. I mean, that's not really their beat. They comment more on media, and unfortunately, a lot of media is located and centralized in metropolitan areas of the United States, so they never really get a chance to approach it from that angle, that red state lens. As a further example, let's just look at someone like Josh Duggar, who some of you may know from that TLC reality series about that extremist religious family with too many kids. Josh Duggar has been convicted of some pretty awful crimes against children and is still defended in conservative media spaces. This is not some one-off or some sort of side effect of his celebrity. This is actually an average conservative reaction to crimes against children when the perpetrator is on their side, quote unquote, a Republican, a conservative, whatever. But, like I said before, it's okay. Just keep hammering, but please, 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 everyone in those spaces, temper your expectations. Well, that's a short one, and I know that could have just been a community post, but, gotta try to keep my stats and activity up. And I recently noticed that the Vanguard are starting to do movie reviews, which is rad, but it felt a bit hurtful in the episode announcing their intentions to start reviewing films, because they kept saying over and over in the episode that no one is watching movies online from a left-wing perspective, and I know I have no reason to actually feel bad about that. They don't know who I am, but maybe one day, by some stroke of luck, my channel will get enough traction so that they may notice and say, hey, we're not the only ones doing this thing, but, probably not anytime soon, because my output is terrible. Anyway, thanks, bye.